It's my very, very great pleasure to introduce Alexander Waugh. Alexander is Evelyn Waugh's grandson and our general editor on this edition. We're going to be discussing some of the experiences we've been having on approaching the commentary with Martin Stannard as well, who's our co-executive editor and the principal investigator on the project. So we've called this discussion Approaching the Commentary, and without further ado, I'll hand over to Alexander, and we'll have a very sort of to-the-point discussion for about half an hour.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Thank you, Barbara.
You want the handbook up? Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So we can start off. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Well, let's try and keep this really quick and efficient, shall we? Because otherwise we might collapse. First of all, we can discuss what we mean by commentary. Martin. Put you in the hot spot.
Well, I think perhaps before you ask that question, you want to ask who your implied reader is. So there is stuff in the handbook about this, a sort of jokey reference to not needing to say what Hamlet is, for example. So I guess we're pitching it at the sort of serious undergraduate reader and upwards. Somebody who might be considered to be an intelligent general reader as well as a specialist general. A specialist general reader, so somebody who's not necessarily an Evelyn Waugh expert. There are lots of Evelyn Waugh fans out there who might want to buy these books, you never know, not just libraries. And so we want, I think as our implied audience, we want an intelligent, well-read person. We don't need to explain that Hamlet, but we might need to explain about the politics of the 1930s, in my case, as background to Violent Bodies.
Yeah, we live in an interesting new world, don't we? In which actually you can find pretty well anything you want in 5 seconds flat on the internet. Yeah. And I don't know if that alters to any degree what the sort of content we put in. I mean, knowing that anybody can find it. I mean, I'm probably doing more footnotes than anybody else here because I'm doing the letters and diaries, and clearly every person gets a footnote. We can talk about that. But then, so quite often I find myself I'm just saving someone who's got the book a couple of seconds by looking it up and putting it in a footnote. Do you think that, given we now live in the internet age where there's so much information, we can actually afford to have fewer footnotes than older editions of?
I don't know. I think you might run the risk of savage reviews if lots of relatively obscure things went unannotated. So it's got to, I mean, the what we want to end up with is something that looks like a thoroughgoing, professional, scholarly edition. At the other end of the scale, I don't think we want to sort of weigh it down with acres of footnotes. I mean, for instance, if I were wanting to talk about last week's Prime Minister in Violent Bodies, for example, I'm not going to write an essay on Chamberlain and Baldwin. But you need something compact which will, as it were, itemise the main players in that political forum and lead people on. I think then, if they're interested in following it up, then they can go, on the internet and look up the details, and maybe even read a book. But I think we've got to help our reader get to that point, as it were. We've got to in as compact a way as possible, answer any questions that the average intelligent reader might want to ask. So,
can we take an example? People. A lot of footnotes I'm doing about people, and how we structure that and what we put in it. The two points that occur. I think quite obviously we put birth and death dates in. I've been putting middle names. You may think that's exasperating, but I can tell you it's far more exasperating for me because I've got millions and millions of people to do. But you can find it without too much difficulty on something called Ancestry. Do you all know about Ancestry? It's quite an extra. You have to pay for it. It's quite expensive, but it's absolutely fantastic resource for finding when anybody was born or died or who they married. And I've been using it an enormous amount. I mean, in seconds you can find when someone died or was born. Now, in the main footnote, if you've had, let's say, Cyril Connolly, let's just imagine we're doing a footnote on him. So I put Cyril, middle names, close bracket, birth and death dates. Now, we can go through a certain amount of points of his career, which is probably quite long, or the numbers of books he wrote. I was thinking it's quite a good idea to swing. Someone like him is quite famous. You would imagine that most people who are looking at this edition have a reasonably good idea of who he is anyway. But you could swing the footnote slightly to incorporate information about him and Evelyn Waugh. You know, if you, for instance, knew when they first met, or have a way of saying how their relationship was prickly. So it's quite Evelyn Waugh-centric footnotes, if we can.
Yeah. But a general kind of lead for the reader who's never heard of Connolly is a good idea to begin with, I think. There would be a surprising number of people who haven't, particularly among students. So you do, I think, need to just sort of get that basic information in.
Well, writer, critic, done in 2 words. Then.
Yeah, but he's a bit more interesting than that.
Of course. Well, in terms of who he is, then you can say.
Yeah, and you could maybe just cite his works he's most famous for, or something, you know, Water of the Rock Pool and The Unquiet Grave or something, and give the dates of those. But the
and can we throw some names in that we don't? I mean, you said Shakespeare. I'm going to footnote Shakespeare. Where's the sort of barrier here? Wordsworth? We're not going to put poet, Wordsworth, dates. Too pathetic.
Yeah, well, I think exactly. I mean, what we assume to be fairly common knowledge among literate people, we don't need to annotate. But it might be something very particular about Wordsworth in the context of the quotation, which would be interesting. But you could still give his dates, I suppose. I mean, also the other thing that occurs to me about this is that you were, for those names that were going to recur, we were going to have a glossary, weren't we? So that will get rid of quite a lot of this problem.
There was a glossary of nicknames as well. So if you've got Pete, you know, the first time you'll say who it is, and then if you're further in the book, and you find Pete, and you're not necessarily going to be able to find that footnote very easily, so you'll look up Pete in a glossary of nicknames, which will tell you it's. And we just hope that we're not going to find too many examples of the same nickname used for 2 different people in different volumes.
Yeah.
Can happen.
But I think the.
Sorry, just a question about Cyril Connolly as the example. Would you be putting in information about where there are characters in the fiction who are reliably associated with Connolly?
I think definitely.
Yes.
Definitely, because that's getting it back to being an Evelyn Waugh-centred type entry.
And it kind of focuses that sense of why they had a prickly relationship. This is very much, by the way, a conversation. I don't know why us 2 are sitting at the head of it, but it's just a conversation for everyone, and particularly Don. Because it's really important to what you're doing, these footnotes. So if you and I at least feel that we're on the same, then we can set an example to the people doing the fiction, which is probably going to use fewer footnotes. But yeah.
Although I would raise the example of Helena because the number of
historical
figures, geographical places. I mean, it's a short novel, but the notes could just go.
Yeah.
Great.
You have to keep it.
I'm having fun, but as long as that's
you have
okay.
to keep it tight. Yeah. Otherwise, you'll be writing the history.
I mean, it would, yes. I would be fascinated to read all the notes you'd provide, because we don't necessarily know much about that history. I think quite comprehensive.
Alexander, when I come up with it.
It's a nice short novel as well, isn't it? So
it'll be as big as any of the others by the time it's got the notes.
So in other words, Martin, it's common sense. Where would we do Wordsworth? No. Browning? No.
I think so, yeah. Yep.
Gerald Manley Hopkins, no. I'm trying to think of a poet you're going to suddenly say yes
I
to.
don't think there's any point in kind of loading the whole thing down with obvious references.
No.
It's my sense of it is, if I were reading this and I came across the name of somebody or a place or something, and I wasn't clear what the significance of this person was or who this person was, I'd want a footnote or an endnote, just telling me briefly who this was and how this person might have related to Waugh.
Yeah. Okay, on the question of style, because I think this is quite important.
Question relating to that?
Well, yeah, I was thinking about. Sorry, if you.
That's right.
If you were inviting contributions, I was
Yep.
thinking about a couple of particular proper names. One is Arnold Bennett, you remember as the punchline of the joke in Decline and Fall, and I think I probably would footnote that in order to give a bit of context to the book. And I'd also probably mention that Bennett reviewed Decline and Fall afterwards. But I would imagine if I were editing one of the non-fiction volumes, perhaps the form of words that I'd use might be a little bit different. You wouldn't use the same footnote for the same name in the fiction or the non-fiction. I think we discussed a little bit about this last time we met. The other name that I was thinking of as a parallel to Shakespeare, Wordsworth, Browning is Matisse, isn't it? In the first chapter that gets what the painting gets thrown in into varies depending on what copy text you're using, of course. But actually, it's Michael in fact wrote this footnote. I think I probably would footnote Matisse again, just to give a bit of context or understanding for the joke.
And it might be interesting to try and get some sense of to what degree Matisse was recognised at the time of the book, because obviously now he's probably much more famous than he might necessarily have been in 1928.
Yes.
I mean, what was your general knowledge name in 1928?
I think it was.
Well, as in my preliminary, as those of us that have done this exercise before, these are the things that it could be. You end up, that 10% of the footnotes end up consuming 90% of your time. You can spend a week researching them. My sense of it is that for people in the know, Matisse was pretty old hat by the 1920s. That he'd already done his more daring work. But if you're a member of the Bollinger Club, then Matisse is still pretty avant-garde. So
Right.
that's why anyone that owns a Matisse gets singled out for ragging.
Yeah.
That's my understanding of how the comedy works.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that would be a quite nice point in the footnote, wouldn't it?
Yeah. You may find that there was an exhibition of Matisse that year or something.
That's a thought.
Sorry to bore you and overlabour you, but that's the sort of thing I'm having to look at there. Should we just move briefly on to style here?
Yeah.
My general overview, and I've written a lot of footnotes already, and so I'm really hoping that whatever comes out of this meeting, it doesn't require me to rewrite the whole lot. But I know that Don's written an awful lot too, and I hope our styles are roughly compatible. And I've been trying to do them as much as possible in annotated form. I avoid on as a preposition for a date. You just put the date in a bracket.
Yeah. If you look behind,
We've got
this is our
this.
discussion.
Good.
Over the past few weeks over email, we've been sort of trying to thrash this out a bit. This is taken from New Clark's rules. It's just one example, as you can see. We'll have a bookstall here tomorrow, and I've asked the manager to bring some copies of New Clark's rules. So
Oh, you're doing RJ Faith, are you? Gosh. Okay. I thought you were doing Faith RJ, but never mind. I can change it.
This is what AUP wants to use, is it?
Well, they've been CC'd into our discussions, and no one said, "Stop! This is wrong."
No, I think that's good. That's clean.
As long as we're all doing the same thing, I think they'll be happy.
That's clear, but that's a bibliographical entry, which I'm talking about. Cyril Connolly married in 1926, so I would just put he married Sonia something bracket 1926.
Haven't you been
Could
doing
use
that?
an M full stop.
Yes, M. Sorry, I was talking more of the date in that respect.
Yeah.
But as a general principle, get it as tight as you can down to a kind of telegraphese. So no kind of narrative flourishes, but just hard information, which doesn't have to be in complete sentences.
Could I throw in a piece of total pure pedantry just at the moment? I actually looked up the latest OUP style guide the other day. I think it's 2012, and the first part of the book is the New Hearts rules. So they've obviously adopted that as their style guide.
Right.
The second half is some dictionary of terms.
Didn't like
Right.
it much, actually.
Right.
First of all, they abandoned the publisher.
And obviously there's things in the rules that you'll see there which I think are already written down, aren't they? For instance, Evelyn Waugh is always EW in the notes. W stands for war, so it's Arthur W. Without a punctuation mark after it. These things you'll find, won't we?
Yes, I'm building in the editor's resources section of our project website. We are building abbreviations lists, so a lot of those are on there already. And after this weekend, I'll be adding a few more. But yes, they'll be live for our editors.
Yeah. So I think, generally speaking, it's common sense, and brevity is what's lovely. And I think don't be afraid. I mean, don't all turn into clowns and things, but the odd bit of wit is attractive, I think. You know, if you can make someone smile with a footnote without showing off, it's a nice idea.
Blue decayed streaks of silliness.
Yeah.
In humour is in cheese, isn't it?
Yeah. I put one joke that I bet Martin and David and various people are going to cut out, but I'll just see how long I can get away with it. But I'll tell you the joke. It's in the early diaries. Evelyn Waugh says, "Future editor, please cut this out." EW, and I've just put no AW. Probably go, but I'll see how long I can keep it there. Yeah. But it would just seem so funny. Suddenly, future editor, I'm being addressed. And
So what are you going to do about it? I wonder, is this, because I know we have people in the room who've been working on similar editions, does any of this discussion, has this come up on sort of the Richardson or on Ford Maddox Ford?
Yes, I think we've come actually to very similar conclusions to your conclusions, which is telegraph ease, as you say, avoiding narrative flourishes. What I think I'm interested to hear actually that you're building all these things into the website. I think that's something we need to be doing more. I don't think we're communicating necessarily. We've sent out kind of all our guidelines to all the editors, but when things come up, it tends to be just a little kind of flurry of emails, and then we don't kind of revise the guidelines or right. And I think we need to be doing that probably a bit more comprehensive. I was wondering if are the open access what you've been doing? Can I spy on them or?
I will let you. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll let you in. This is our project website. Most of this is open to public viewing. There's just one section on it that's just for our editors. That's the red section at the bottom there. But yeah, I think it'd be helpful for you to have a look at that stuff, and that's fine by me. I mean, there's various reasons why this isn't on. I mean, partly a lot of it's not relevant to the general public. Some of it is sort of things about expenses and nuts and bolts. But basically, we're creating a list here that sort of complements our editor's handbook. So yeah, things like indexing advice, style guides, handbooks, project directory, and sort of text templates and things like that. So they all go in there. I sort of send around emails every so often and let people to their presence. Who's used these resources? Simon James has used them. Who knows they're there but hasn't used them yet? Yeah. So I mean, communication is a big issue on the project of this size generally.
Maybe this is. Tell me if I'm in the wrong discussion here. But what I'd love to get going is a blog.
Well, got a blog.
Yeah, but does it work? What I would like is that that an email arrives every time anybody has a query about anything. It goes bing, and then you could, like a normal blog, and then I can, and it appears online.
Yeah, well, if we all use the forum, we can make that happen.
Yeah, but can we do it? And we need
yes.
we need the emails coming to us. That's the
yeah, we can do that. We can set that up.
Because otherwise we look on it, see has anyone put.
Basically,
I don't think anyone's using it, are they?
No, they're not. But it's there and it's ready, and you have to do it. That's the thing. You have to tick a box that says, "I want emails about this," and then you'll get them. I can't harass you with you have to sort of...
No, but can you help us? Can you set us up with it? Because I think then we'll all be a team. You'll really feel that we're a team, and anyone's got any query, boing, it comes through on each file. Anyone who can answer it does. We really start pulling together because we're all in different places, and it's very stodgy and difficult.
Yeah.
I have a question. If there's, for instance, some character from Waugh's undergraduate days who appears in the fiction and in the journalism, can one share a note, as it were, between two different volumes? can I refer to Don's note on this person, basically, is what
No.
I'm wondering. No. So what do I do?
You just note it independently.
I think you have to have your own note.
I
Yeah.
have to have my own note, even though it may use material that he has
Yeah,
provided.
that's okay.
Well,
I mean, this is a touchy thing, because obviously one doesn't want to plagiarize. But if exactly the right essential material is already there.
yeah. Well, see, I've got this worse than anyone because in the volumes of letters and diaries, I think the rule we're playing with at the moment is each volume has to have each person noted once, so that obviously someone who appears in 6 volumes in a row, I'm going to have to just probably repeat the same note, which is a bit boring, or find a way of making each one slightly different, but apart from the obvious dates.
But the glossary, I mean, if these are recurrent figures, the glossary will solve that problem. You don't need to repeat them. You just there's a glossary. People can look up the name in the glossary.
Well, I think there needs to be a footnote for the first time someone's mentioned in each volume.
First time.
Yeah.
And will the glossary point out which volumes that figure appeared in? Because that would be really useful. Because it's the cross-referentiality that's important here. That Anne's note might be slightly different about the same person, but if she says see also so-and-so volume, page so-and-so, where this figure appears slightly differently, because that could be fascinating in itself.
Yeah. Well, that brings us back to the problem of cross-referencing.
Yeah, we'd like to talk about that some more after lunch, I think, because we'll have Rachel Platt from OUP sitting here as well, and she can talk a bit about the process of actually getting our proofs up, so we've got numbers for other volumes before they actually get published.
Because the more editors do talk to each other, which I agree is a real strength, the more they're going to want to say the result of this conversation. Look at X, Y, Z in other volumes. So so OUP has to agree to us having that conversation, taking up more space and time.
It'll be difficult though with the rollout if things are coming out, right? I mean, to match it up for pagination with something that's going to be not going to exist.
I mean, but the original conception was that we would go to kind of proof, as it were, where the pagination was fixed fairly quickly, because we weren't going to change anything, or very, very little, in UK1. And that was what was unique about this. And so it depends on OUP, really. What OUP decide they're prepared to do, or what they can afford to do.
You could paginate, theoretically, a note that doesn't yet exist.
Sorry?
You could paginate a note that does not yet exist.
Well, you could leave it out, but I mean, for those people publishing the early volumes, they will want pagination if they're cross-referring to another book in the series.
And there's no point in having that brilliant search tool in the repository if you're not going to look at the word Helena and see, the dozen times that it appears over the course and point them up.
That's the whole point. We can do electronic searches, but the question is, I mean, you can therefore, isolate the instance of its appearing elsewhere. What you can't do is nail down, let's say, which volume of the letters. Well, you might be able to do that because of dating, but even that it might shift, mightn't it, when we're thinking of shifting the dating of the EAR.
Yeah, that brings up a point that's very important, actually. Could anyone who is citing a letter please cross-check it with me on the date, unless you happen to know that the date was written on the top of the letter? Because I've done a huge amount of redating of letters from Mark Amery, and it'd be a great shame if you just use a Mark Amery date that I've realised is wrong. But I'll be looking through everything that's written at some point, so I'll be able to cross. But if you have any doubts about the date of a letter, please just email me and I'll...
Could we ask on that, I mean, you're going to have a heck of a lot of reading to do, but I'm conscious of that, having cited these, because at the moment, apart from individual emails that you'll be very kindly sending on specific points, it's the only source I have for letters. I could easily highlight them in electronic text, but they probably all do need checking.
The electronic text at the moment is not reliable for dates.
Not our repository one. I mean, the Word files I'm working on.
Yeah.
Or put some code that will enable us to go through. Because in some ways, when I look at my edition, we've corresponded that. Please make sure you don't just cite the Avery edition. Well, someone, and I feel that someone's got to be you in the end, has got to check each time I've cited this volume, because it's the only access in Leeds I have to this document.
Each time you've cited Amory.
Yeah, and I mean, hopefully it's not too
Right.
laborious, but there must be other texts similar to mine where you do need to cite the letters, particularly in the
Yeah.
application, the reviews.
And how are we going to cite them in notes? Just, I think, EW2, and then the name. EW2.
But that was my...
Tom Dryburg.
Will I remove the Amory and I'll just put EW2?
To Tom Dryburg, and then the date, Jan 12 something.
Key into your edition when that's published.
Yes, but what I'd like you to be able to do is write the date in exactly the way I've written it. So it'll be a square bracket or see whatever version it is.
You might hate me for this, but I also think it's very useful if you've got it to cite the address. So from wherever.
That will be possible in most cases. We're building the database, and I've got an excellent Excel person putting in wherever we've got address information on a letter, it will be in the database.
Sorry, Martin. So you mean from
So
EW brackets Coombe Flooring?
EW2 Tom Dryburg, 10th of August, 1938.
Yeah.
From Tom Dryburg's wherever he was when he wrote the letter. Oh, sorry, wherever EW was when he wrote the letter.
Oh, from Coombe Flooring or whatever. Yeah. Okay.
Because that's really helpful, I think, to people to get an understanding. I mean, if it was in Abyssinia, for example, he's writing to something, he's making a big effort.
You have to be awfully careful, as we know. He uses his Abyssinian paper all over the place when he's in England. And
Is this the form you mean?
He does.
Is that what you're
not January in a footnote.
Just
That'll be Jan.
Just Jan, so a shortened one.
So it'll be 12 Jan 19,
Yeah, that'll do, I think.
12
1940, whatever.
or whatever. Oh, sorry about that, guys.
And of course the bracket. Now you see, this is Now, quite often I've used square brackets for dates, and we all know what would mean there. And sometimes I will have, 12 in a square bracket, Jan 1940. So we want to reproduce the way it's put on the letter.
Well, we could just get rid of the brackets altogether, really, and just have commas, couldn't we? Comma.
And or whatever brackets I've used for the actual letter itself, so you know which part of that date is written on the letter, or which part's conjectural, or which part's circa.
Oh, well, square brackets obviously for
for
editorial interpolation,
Yeah.
saying this date's wrong.
That's right.
This is the correct date. Yeah.
That's right. So whatever appears there will be the same as it is on the top of the actual letter in our edition. That's what I'm hoping we can
I
do.
have commas after Dryburg in 1940.
It's a bit like Carol Borden then. Commas in. There we go.
One problem we're getting into here. All footnotes so far, the ones I've done, have dates in brackets. Now we're talking about something a little bit more specialised, because we're talking about cross-referring dates that sometimes use closed brackets, square brackets, and sometimes don't have brackets. So, do we put the whole thing? Do we put the whole thing in soft brackets with square brackets? Otherwise, we've got a totally different style here. Suddenly,
I would just have square brackets after that if the date has been revised by you. So that would be the date that was on the letter.
Sure.
Or not.
What I'm saying is that
So you'd have
in
NT.
footnotes generally, all dates are in brackets.
Yeah.
All of them in soft brackets, right? So Connolly was born the 1940s soft bracket. This is an exceptional situation where we're cross-referring to a letter which has got a different set of bracket signs, because you're dealing with whether we know whether that date was exactly the date of the letter or not.
I think that would be more normal.
So, unless you put bracket within bracket. So if on the top of my letter I've actually put 12 in a square bracket, Jan 1940, then in this reference perhaps we should have soft bracket, square bracket 12, square bracket closed, Jan 1940, soft bracket
Yeah,
M.
that makes sense. Like that.
Because do you see why I'm suggesting it's necessary? Because otherwise you have a mismatch in your style between normal note dates and these note dates. Suddenly you've got unbracketed note dates. I think that is better. If you,
That makes sense.
it looks slightly odd, but at least date's always in a soft bracket, and then if it's a letter reference date, it follows the... Anyone want to comment on this?
Does that mean that, looking at the first line, we've got the soft brackets on the outside? Does the 12 in square brackets, to me, I mean, maybe this is just the way I read it, means that you as an editor have interpolated the date as the 12th?
Yes, on the actual edition, when you find the letter itself. Because what you're trying to... is anyone who wants to read that letter, they go to the volume, they go to the 1940s volume and get the letter. So they'll want to see it presented as it's presented, square bracket 12 Jan 1940.
I do realise, sorry, I'm just going to pause there because I realise we're descending into something quite technical which may not be the whole interest of everyone. So at this point, if we can carry on this discussion with our editorial group and anyone else who wants to join in. But if anyone would like to take this opportunity to have a look at the bibliography and the forum, then please do so. As I say, the bibliography is happening in Chestnut, which is that way, and the forum is in Maple, that way. But we can carry on discussing this for as long as we wish. Well, until, actually not as long as we wish, till 1, if we wish to. But I think that might be a good point to have a little read.
Can I just check then, Alexandra, on that the soft brackets 12th of January 1940,
which go around any date.
I would tend to read as there is no dispute over this date. It could be on the letter, but it is agreed this letter was sent 12th of January.
Yeah.
The one with soft brackets on the outside and then square round 12 implies to me that editorially I've supplied that date.
I've supplied the date.
If it was dubious, you could also have within the square brackets 12 question mark.
I've been using question mark and also circa. A little c, so we've got both those.
That would be a pretty standard device.
I think if it hasn't got a date on it, you should have ND as in the standard HRC presentation. Yeah? I mean, so people know, okay, this is an undated letter, but you're ND and then in square brackets, your interpolated date.
I mean,
or circa, whatever. As close as you can.
Okay, I mean, on the letters themselves, Martin, I'm assuming that if you see I've got a square bracket around the whole thing, it means that is not on the letter, it is not dated. So I'm not writing ND. Anything in square is what I've put on.
I think, okay.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
So square bracket 12 Jan 1940 end square bracket means there's no date on it, but I've worked out that that's what the date of the letter is. And if I'm in any doubt, then yes, I use a question mark or a circa, a little c.
So are you saying if you cannot work out the date at all, you're leaving it as end of detail?
Oh, well, I can always work. I mean, at very least, it's between 1903 and 1966. Sure. I can narrow it down a bit. Now I can usually. I mean, actually, it's slightly off what we're talking about, but it is an extraordinary thing about Evelyn Waugh's letters, how dateable they are. I mean, very, very rarely I get one that just flummox me. And usually you can get it to the actual day.
How often did he not date the letters?
A lot. I mean, pre-1950s. What really made him wake up about dates was writing the biography of Knox. Because he got really frustrated looking through Knox's papers and nobody was dating them. And then he writes to all his friends, bossing them, saying, "Can you date your letters?" And he starts dating them
I
too.
think anyone who works in biographies had a similar experience, actually. Once you've actually tried to piece together someone's pile of papers, you start being a lot more accurate yourself.
But I've collated the earliest and latest dates of all the different papers he's been using in the letterhead, so that helps.
So when you were doing the Ford, what kind of style did you use for designating quotations from letters?
I think it was all based on the...
did you give a...
The MHRA handbook in those days.
Okay. I mean, the one thing that occurs to me is what we want is a style that conforms with normal scholarly practice. So, people who are used to reading these things know what it means.
Yeah,
straight away.
That's fine. So, if we have any other examples, we could bring into this. That would be great. Does anyone? Nobody knows offhand of anyone.
Does your question mark go after or before the item being queried?
After.
12 query.
12 query.
12
yeah.
query. Is that right? And then
yeah, or if he's written on the letter 12th, and I've worked out the year, and I think it's January.
Okay,
Then
I'll
it'll be-
give you another example of that.
It'll be 12. Yeah, you can give me an example of that.
So we'll have our soft brackets because our dates are now in soft brackets always. Yes?
In the footnotes, they're always in soft brackets. On the letters, they're obviously not.
Barbara, can I just ask about that? Because in the MDATV, you've maybe put space in if I'm doubting a word,
No,
it's illegible. So should there be a space after the square bracket and before the question mark in this case as well?
You just run me through that again.
In the MDATV, where there's an illegible word,
Yeah.
and I'm making a supposition, and
Yeah.
there's a question mark,
Yeah.
you've said leave a space, like where the cursor is now. Originally, because naturally I would close that space, but so in the MDATV I've got spaces in, but
The question mark should be in square brackets and in row rather than attached.
That wouldn't be right, Barbara. By the way.
So tell me what I should do.
So it would be, I mean, in your case,
Yeah.
it would be
Yeah,
ledge without a full stop.
square bracket after 1940.
And
ledge without a full stop.
yeah, and
Get rid of that one.
and if it's a deletion,
Yeah.
it would be within.
Yeah.
It would all be italicised.
Surely you have to. Sorry, if it's only January that's being queried.
No, this is another issue.
In this particular instance, he's written 12. He's just written 12th on the letter.
So in that case, the question mark should go to 1940, shouldn't it?
I know it's 1940, and I think it's January.
Well, you could just do circa
We're
January.
looking to have a letter writer who writes the 12, because Sophie Ritson would...
Yeah, I think it's a very rare example. I don't think we've got that. Now, quite often he's written a Feast of St. Peter and St. Paul or something like that. So then I've written Feast of St. Peter and Paul, then I've square bracketed and put exactly the date. But I think, obviously, for these notes, when you're cross-referring to a letter, don't bother with Feast of Peter and Paul, just put square brackets, 12th of January, because you just want the quickest way to find it.
It's worth mentioning as well that in our database that we're setting up, you will have both of those dates as well. You've got a field for date in text, which is what he actually wrote, and then you've got a start date that we've decided. So you've got both what the letter tells you and what editorial intervention says.
Yeah.
Two separate fields.
So, should we go with this unless anyone, if someone comes up with a really good, as Martin says, scholarly practice on what someone else has done on this, then could you let us know? But I think that makes sense until we find what
so
other
we've
people are
got
doing.
Square brackets for editorial intervention, and we've got questionable question.
At what point do you make the distinction between using C for circa and using a question mark? Is there a kind of a level of certainty that you have about something, whether it's just completely, I don't know, here's a query, this is my best guess, or circa, which is a slightly better guess?
To be honest with you, it's a good question. To be honest with you, now I think about it, I'm nearly always using circa, and although I've got this idea of the question mark, I don't think I've actually used it that often.
That's better, actually.
Circa. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Because the question mark implies a lot more uncertainty than circa.
Sorry.
A question mark, I think, implies more uncertainty.
Yeah.
Oh no, it could imply that you think that that's what the number is from when you're looking at it.
Yeah.
Like you would in the MDATV.
That's right.
I think it's
Where
legible,
is it
but
a
I
5
think
or a
it's
6?
12.
Is it the 15th or the 16th?
In that case,
Guessing the date.
yes. I mean, I think the question marks would be in square brackets. Isn't it pathetic? But that kind of sort of sense of, whenever we do that in MDATV, that means the editor is uncertain how to read this, thinks it's this, but isn't sure.
Yeah. But for the main point of what we're saying here, anyone who wants to cross-reference a record, a letter, what I'm suggesting is you take exactly what I've put on the top of the letter and put it in soft brackets, right? That's all you have to worry about. I think I have to worry about a bit more.
I'm puzzled by the need for the soft brackets.
As I said to you, it's to do with style, because every other date in all the notes has a soft bracket around it. So now suddenly you're saying we could have some naked dates just because it's a cross-reference on a letter. So it's consistency of...
In the other ones?
Because we're avoiding the words in and on and everything. And we've put them on every footnote so far. And they're on the bibliographical footnotes.
Were there any sort of parenthetic things about the dates of somebody's birth or death, aren't they? They're not about...
It's just style. I mean, if you want to be consistent of style, then we're using brackets. I mean, at the moment you're suggesting sometimes we don't have brackets, sometimes we will, depending on whether it's a cross-reference to a letter or whether it's the date of someone's marriage or it's a bibliographical date. I mean, I'm suggesting we keep it consistent, just brackets on dates. It's tidier, we know what we're doing. Although I accept that then you end up with this occasional squares within sophs, but